Hi friends, section 10 actually sums up what we have studied as all definition because this now says that consent is the key. And essentially, what is a contract? It's a consensual act, and parties are free to settle any terms they like. Of course, you know, as we have noted earlier, the terms should not be contrary to or against the law or violation of the laws. Then they become void or voidable. The Madras High Court said this in the case of State of Madras versus Ramalingam. And the statute can compel a person to enter into a contract, for example, insurance policies of a motor vehicle. There, you don't have a volition. If you buy a motor car, you have to take insurance. And therefore, you are feeling the compulsion to enter into that contract. Also, there may be regulated commodities with fertilizer, cement, where cement sold to allottees under orders passed under the Cement Control Act or Fertilizer Control Act. There, you can say in a way that the parties do not enjoy freedom in making a contract. As we go on to the consent, the expression consent, the language of section 10, 13, 14 suggests that the consent should be from both parties to the contract. And we will now study that there should be no element which affects the consent. We'll study those elements, but undue influence can mar actually one party's consent as tainted. So also, I was discussing with you consideration in section 2D. Section 25 of this act says an agreement without consideration is void unless it falls under three exceptions. What are those exceptions, friends? Those are gift, compensation for work done, and payment of loan barred by time, where limitation applies. But if the parties have agreed that they will, one party has agreed to pay the time barred loan, that's fine. It falls under one of those three exceptions in section 25. What is the formality in concluding a contract? You have studied sections 2 to 10 with me, and we have said that a contract concluded in a manner set in 2 to 10 does not require any writing or a particular form. But there may be parties where they may have their own formats. Formal requirements may be prescribed by special, for example, insurance companies have their own formats, and certain other employer companies have their own formats, and government contracts have to be drawn in the formal manner as under Article 299 of the Indian Constitution. Similarly, there may be oral contracts. What are those? An oral contract by which itself the parties intend to be bound is valid and enforceable. If you read Anson's commentary on contract law, there is a lot of emphasis on oral contracts. And oral contracts have the same validity as written contracts. But there should be supporting evidence and satisfactory evidence about formation and the contents. And again, let's say, are signatures of the parties essential to a valid contract? The answer is no, it's not necessary. Now, friends, let's move on to section 11, where this section deals essentially with the competency and authority of the persons who can enter a valid enforceable contract. What does it say? It says, has it attained the age of majority? Because we all have studied that a minor is incompetent to enter a contract, and we will further see lunatics and people who are under some kind of what are those other what are other limitations which debar a party from entering a contract. Now, we also say that the person should have a sound mind. He is not disqualified from contracting legally. And let's not confuse this. Authority is different from competency. A person authorized by a corporation has the authority, but whether he is competent or not, if a company authorizes a minor, he obviously is not competent. Now, pre-incorporation contracts, if company may on incorporation enter into a new contract to implement the terms of the pre-incorporation contract, because during the or before we register a company, the promoters may enter into some kind of a agreement or a contract, but after a company has been registered or incorporated, then there should be a new contract to implement the terms of the pre-incorporation contract. Section 15H of the Specific Relief Act provides that the company can enforce a pre-incorporation contract if warranted by the terms of incorporation, and if the company has accepted the contract and communicated acceptance to the other party. Similarly, under Section 19C of the Specific Relief Act, third party can enter into contract against the company. These are in regard to executory contract, and as we have studied earlier, Supreme Court has granted its approval to two types of contracts. One is executive, which is performance is immediate, executory, where the performance is in future, and do not apply to conveyance of immovable property. Illiteracy, now weakness of mind, immaturity, absence of skill or knowledge, short of unsoundness of what is being transacted, inequality of bargaining power, unfamiliarity of language, they do not affect the competency. It's very important that we understand that these people are fully competent to enter into a contract. An illiterate person has the same capability to enter into a contract as a literate person, except that when an illiterate person signs, there must be recording to the effect that the contents of the the agreement have been read aloud, explained, and he has understood in the language that he understands. Weakness of the mind is a comparative term. Immaturity, nobody has been ever able to say whether this person, it's a subjective opinion. Similarly, if I am not skilled into engineering, but I am a director of the company, it is not that I am unqualified to sign a contract which involves awarding a contract of construction, of awarding a contract of a large project being given to an large engineering company like Larsen Toubro. If I am the director and if I am not qualified in engineering, I'm still competent enough to sign that. Similar situation applies to the knowledge. I may not have any knowledge of engineering, but so long as I understand the terms of the contract, I am fully competent. Shortness of unsoundness of what is being transacted. This is absolutely something which is again subjective. Inequality of bargaining power. Uh, we will discuss this issue under a different section where we might say that there was undue influence. But bargaining power, if a company is small but it is giving a contract to a large company, let's say a small company has taken a project which also involves giving a part of the job to a large company like Larsen Toubro, there is obviously there is a difference of bargaining power. But then, so long as the company awarding the contract to a larger company understands what it is awarding, there's no bar to the competency. Unfamiliarity of language. Let's say I go to Tamil Nadu or Orissa, and the condition there is that the contract should be signed in Tamil or in Odia. Obviously, I am not familiar with those two languages, but that does not bar me or does not affect my competency to enter into a contract in Tamil or in Odia. Adult Parda-Nashin women are sui juris. They are equally competent and cannot be treated like minors or incapable of conducting their own business. There are situations, particularly, you don't see many of such situations in India, but there are situations in many neighboring countries where, like Islamic republics, and I have seen that in Indonesia, Malaysia, where Parda-Nashin women, they are managing directors or they are directors. They sign the contracts, they fully understand the contract, just that they are Parda-Nashin, they wear burqa and they cover their faces sometimes or only cover their head, but there is nothing that affects their competency into signing the contract. Friends, here the section deals with personal capacity of the following types. One is arising from the age, other is due to unsoundness of mind, third is by virtue of the provisions of law. All these sections deal with personal competence of individuals. You fully understand that legal persons are not dealt by these sections. Their competence flows from law. Contractual incompetence is what the object is only to protect those whose minds are underdeveloped. An incompetent person cannot bind himself, but he is competent to enforce a promise made by other to him. Let's say there is a person of unsound mind and I make a promise to give him 50,000 rupees, he can enforce it against me. But if he makes a promise to give me 50,000, I cannot enforce that promise of his. That's the only purpose of this, is that contractual incompetence is only with a view to protect those people who suffer from certain infirmities. Friends, let me mention to you the provision of Indian Majority Act 1875, Section 3, which was amended in 1999 for uniform majority of all persons domiciled in India. Now, for example, uniform majority of all persons who are domiciled in India is 18 years. We say that an agreement with a minor is void. Yes, an agreement with a minor is void. A compromise of a suit to which minor is a party and which is made a decree of the court is not void, and also it is only voidable if the parties who has signed this, it is purely left to the option of that party. Similarly, we understand if a minor has undertaken liability jointly with an adult, immunity of a minor cannot absolve the adult promisor from liability. Let's say I go with my son, and who is also filing the income tax and has certain assets in his own name, I go and sign a sale deed, which is of a property belonging to my son on record. But we both sign and sign the conveyance, and the purchaser buys it. Although this will not bind my son nor affect his property, but I can be sued for cheating, or I can be sued for specific performance. Friends, similarly, Section 7 of the Transfer of Property Act 1882 provides every person capable of contract can transfer, but it is not provided that a minor cannot be a transferee. For example, a minor can buy a property from me. He cannot sell his property to me. We have studied the law of partnership, which is a different act and is not covered by Contract Act. But Contract Act, in a passing reference, can say that a minor can be admitted to the benefits of partnership. The purchase of shares in a company law board has held clearly that a minor can be a member of a company in respect of fully paid shares. Let's be very clear. We cannot give partly paid shares to a minor because the company will not be able to enforce the balance of the payment from the minor. Guardians of minor can contract on behalf of minors, including legal guardians. Friends, let's come to soundness of mind as defined and as dealt in Section 12 of the Contract Act. We say when a person enters into a contract and afterwards alleges that he was insane at the time at that time, the contract will be binding on him because it was not that at that time he said that, or it was known that he was unsound. The person otherwise disqualified by law, the capacity of women to contract is not affected by her marriage, either under Hindu law or Mohammedan law. Insolvent, there is no prohibition against a contract by an insolvent after insolvency proceedings have commenced. Until adjudication, until a person has been adjudicated and held and declared insolvent, till then there is no prohibition against him to enter into a contract. Unless, of course, there is an injunction by the court or a stay on something that so that he may be barred from entering into a contract. Very interesting point. You will find that in religious institutions, many properties are held in the name of deities. Now, a deity is not a perpetual minor, and a contract for sale of immovable property belonging to a deity by a trustee is enforceable against deity for legal necessities. For example, if the deity of Lord Krishna in a temple owns certain lands, and then the temple needs renovation, and trustees feel that sale of a small part of the land is necessary to bring money for renovation or construction or repairs, then the marfatdar or the trustee, they can execute the sale for the necessity of the deity. That necessity is a legal necessity. Similarly, a corporation all companies, you see many companies entering into contracts, but of course resolutions have to be passed subject to formalities by the statute. We have dealt above, just a moment ago, we have dealt with pre-incorporation contracts. We say before incorporation, company has no capacity to contract, but whatever promoters have agreed, those terms can, after incorporation, those terms can be incorporated into a new contract, and the company can then, by resolution, adopt that. Section 12 defines what are the conditions of soundness and unsoundness of mind. It must exist at the time of making the contract. And let's remember, mere weakness of mind is not unsoundness of mind. This was decision of Nagpur High Court. The citation is Kanhaiya Lal versus Harsing Lakshman Vanjari, 1944, Nagpur 698. This I am saying because some people have high IQ, some people have low IQ. Now, weakness of mind, you might say, is, disqualifies a person. No, it's not. And somebody may not be as sharp as another. But if he understands what is going on and is capable of understanding what he is transacting and what he is entering into the deal or whatever he is trying to do, he understands that, then soundness exists at the time of making. Mere loss of memory also does not make a person unfit to manage his affairs in lifetime. And test of that is whether a person is incapable of understanding the implication of the business, as I was saying, whether he understands what is going on. Concern and presence or absence of unsoundness of mind at the time of making a contract in all cases is a question of fact. We must be able to prove whether there was soundness of mind or whether the person was incapable of understanding. However, there is a big presumption in favor of sanity. We take, unless proved otherwise, we presume a person to be a sane. Friends, I will mention in today's lecture the last case, Chunilal Bhopal versus Chandra Datta, where a sale was set aside as being signed under the influence of liquor. The obvious reason is that when a person is heavily under the influence of liquor and the other party makes him sign some deal, obviously the presumption is that he at that time was not in his normal senses to be able to understand what the transaction was. With the same result was held in Jyotirindra Bhattacharya versus Sana Bala Bara. That's a case of Gujarat High Court of 2005. Thank you, friends.